Indian ink is such a versatile medium. So when I heard about a resist technique using just ordinary glue, I thought, I'll have a go at that, see what happens, and I'll share the results with you. My name's Liz Chadderton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire, and every week I bring you a tip, trick, or technique that I wish I'd known about ages ago. And this week it's ink resist using glue. I adore Indian ink. I could drink it for breakfast. It is just the most gorgeous material to work with. So when I saw a technique, and it was here on YouTube, a lady called Jane Junewald, and thank you so much, for a resist using glue and Indian ink, I was like, oh, I've got to try that. These were my little sample sheets, just to see that it really did work, and it does. And I want to show you how to do it. The principle is that you use a washable glue to make your pattern or your painting. You coat it with waterproof Indian ink, and then you scrub it off under the tap to reveal the pattern, the painting, the image. So what you need is a good heavyweight piece of watercolour paper. This is going to be run, oh, I don't know what that is, yuck, under the tap, and not all watercolour papers will stand up to it. Some will peel up, fall to pieces. So do a little test first before you do anything that takes you too much time. You obviously need waterproof Indian ink. There is Indian ink that is not waterproof. There are black drawing inks that are not waterproof. So go careful, check. And then you need some glue. This is just white PVA glue. I think in America you call Elmers glue. But the most important thing is that it is washable. Now, some say it's washable when wet. That's not what you want. It's got to be washable when dry. You're looking for the stuff that if a kid coats themselves from head to foot in glue, their parent has some chance of getting it out of their clothes. It's that sort of glue. Let's do a little sample so you can see different ways of putting it on. So I've got a scrap of paper and I'm going to use this. This came from Hobbycraft in the UK. I guess it's a bit like Hobby Lobby in America, but it doesn't matter where it's from. It doesn't have to be expensive stuff. I'm going to put some in this little bottle because I think if I tried to just use this nib as a nib, I think I would make a right mess. So this bottle just has a fine nib to it. I've also tried it with one of these bottles that's got a little metal nib to it, and that worked fine. I guess at some point, if it's too fine, then you know, this stuff is pretty viscous, you wouldn't be able to get it out. I've just roughly drawn some stars and I am going to follow the lines on this one and I'm going to let it dry, and it will take quite a long time because that's pretty thick. The other nice thing, as you saw on that sample, is just to do swirly whirly patterns. So let's do a swirly whirly pattern as well, seeing we're here. You could write. You could use a stencil if you've got lots of stencils. The second way that I've used it is to actually paint it on. And this is what I find quite exciting because it goes on thinner and therefore the ink breaks through and you start to get these tones and patterns. Because you might be thinking to yourself, why don't you just use masking fluid, frisk it? Because that would be so much easier and you get a perfect mark. I don't like perfection. There's the truth. This is just a lot more fun, and you can, by painting it on, you will get some breakthrough and you can do tonal paintings rather than just pure black and white. So here I am painting a star, and therefore the star should be white on a black background. The thicker you put it on, the more it will resist the ink. Slightly thinner, you might get more breakthrough. Here I'm going to do a black star on a white background, so I'm going to just preserve the background. Oh, sorry, obviously had something dirty on my brush. Never mind, really doesn't matter because this is practice just to see whether our materials actually work. Find a flat brush is easier if you want sharp outlines. You can use whatever shape brush you find comfortable and whatever size for what you're doing. Wouldn't use your best watercolour brushes, and even though this is washable, I would say wash it straight, straight away. Just for completeness, let's try a different shape brush and actually try, I don't know, painting some sort of flowery type shape and just see what that comes out like. If you were finding it a bit tricky to see what you've done because we're painting white on white, then you could tint your glue just with a little bit of watercolour. Right, I'll put that lid on because I am a mucky pup, and we need to let that dry. Drying time will vary just depending how thick you put it on. So looking at this, I put that on really thick. That's going to take a lot longer to dry than this. You might want to even leave it overnight to make sure that it is absolutely dry. Here's the fun bit. Just use an old brush and your Indian ink and gently coat the entire surface. Try to only touch it once so you don't dissolve the glue in any way, and then let it dry thoroughly and wash your brush. Once it's fully dry, and that only takes half an hour or so, then it's time for the wash off. You can either do it under running water as I am, or you could use a bowl full of warm water, and warm water will shift and dissolve the glue a bit quicker than cold water. So you run it under the tap, use a brush or your fingers to start to dissolve that glue, and as the glue dissolves it takes away the ink, but it does leave these really interesting tonal patterns and marks which are characteristic of the whole process. Be careful not to fold your paper as you do this, and check that your paper doesn't pill up, that it's not falling to pieces. This is a really good way of just checking all your materials work together and aren't going to give you any nasty surprises at all. The more you rub, the more ink will come off, so be careful, and when you're ready, leave it to dry naturally. This is the design I'm going to do. I've got fish on my mind at the moment. Strange, isn't it? But I thought this would be fun. So I've penciled out my design. We've already seen from that first little test that it's going to get a bit blobby in places. Well, I can live with that. And I've got my little container, and I'm just going to, as finely as possible, do my little outlines. If I want the eye to be white, I need to fill it in. I could do it as an outline. This one's got lovely fat lips. Look at that. Now on a couple of these, I think I will also paint some of the pattern just to get it, well, just to experiment really. Obviously I've got to be careful that I don't smudge the work, so do think where you start. Depending on how thick your nib is, that will make a big difference to the fineness of the detail that you can achieve. So I wouldn't do anything too small and delicate. Don't worry about your pencil lines because they'll either be covered in ink or we can rub those out at the end. I think I might do some bubbles. Now this needs to go somewhere very safe to dry. We do not need to smudge this. So I'll put it somewhere and we'll come back in several hours. This is dried out in the sun and it's time to coat with Indian ink. Remember, just use an old brush and try and hit each spot once. If by any chance you want a really nice clean border on it, you could tape round the edges to protect them. We need to let this dry fully, which will only take, oh, I don't know, 20 minutes, and you can use a hairdryer. Don't forget to wash your brush off. With the ink fully dry, you can again use warm water, either running water or a bowl of warm water, and dissolve that glue away to take the ink with it. Be careful with your brush, don't scrub too hard to damage your paper. Also be careful that if it's a larger piece of paper, you don't crease it while it's wet. The more you scrub, the more the ink will be removed. And personally, I think I've actually removed a bit too much ink here, which makes it look a bit like a child's done this. But you can see the principle. And let's just have a quick look at the dried piece. And this sort of mark is what I'm after with this technique. So, as I said before, I think I washed off a bit too much in my enthusiasm to show you the whole process. And really, what I'm aiming for is this sort of quality of mark here rather than the pure white. So, have a go. See how sophisticated you can make your image and see what results you get. I'd love to see what you do.